I'm Kevin. I work in Chlorine this semester. And Chlorine is basically an OpenCL sort of, not a framework, not a library, but just like an application that helps you write OpenCL. Let's go into what OpenCL actually is. So OpenCL, Open Compute Language, is a cross-platform open source sort of specification for writing parallel code. And this is designed to run on primarily GPUs. You can also throw this on CPUs, supercomputers that are configured to run OpenCL code. And it has a two-part execution model: the host, which is just a program that runs on your computer, and the kernel, which is a separate program that runs on your device. And basically how it works, roughly, I mean, for those of you unfamiliar with how parallel computing works, you have a lot of inputs. All these inputs are passed to each core on a GPU, and that GPU core does some bit of math, and you get a whole bunch of outputs. It's pretty basic. Just some use cases for OpenCL. I've used it to solve the wave equation. This is basically an ordinary differential equation. I've also used it to track particles, and these are in excess of millions of particles. And by particles I mean electrons, basically atoms, but you could apply it to any sort of fluid dynamics simulation. Another really popular use is FFTs. You can also manipulate large data sets on your GPU. And I guess for those of you who like Bitcoin in here, you can also write Bitcoin mining applications in OpenCL, but I'm not really going to go into that. But what are the pitfalls of writing OpenCL applications? Basically, it's really hard to maintain because not only do you have to maintain your computation code that runs on your card, you also need to, every time you update your computation code, have to go and update your host code on the CPU. Right? Let's say you want to give it another memory buffer, or you have some extra data you need to give it and it doesn't fit into the existing structure of your function call. Well, now you have to go and edit your code in two different places. So that's just a pain. And every time you want to write a new program for OpenCL, you now have to write a whole new host code also. So writing new OpenCL programs, or let's say you have some new prototype idea that you want to try out, it takes a long time just to get started with OpenCL. So my solution, Chlorine, which is a generic OpenCL host program, which handles all the basics of getting an OpenCL program started. Basically, it does this in kind of this order, not quite, but it'll read and compile your kernel. Kernels are device compiled, so you have to do it basically every time you add a new device or every time you want to run your program. It'll parse the data that you give it, and you have to give it data in whatever format you want, so long as you give it formatted data. Then it goes through all the nasty process of allocating OpenCL buffers. These are memory buffers that map on your graphics card memory. And then it figures out how to correctly transfer all the data to and from your device. And it also executes, and if you have profiling enabled, profiles your function calls on the kernel, or on the device, sorry. And then it'll output your data, either writes to your disk or your console. In theory, it could also write to your web server somewhere if you really want to write gigabytes of data across the net. I would not recommend that, but in theory you could do that. Basically, the short version, you only need to write kernel code. So you don't ever have to write the host if you just want to, try adding all the numbers from 0 to 1,000 in 1,000 different array elements. You can just write your kernel code and then give it some basic information about how to read that kernel, and then you're done. There's no more worrying about every time I want to update my kernel, I have to go back and update and add the extra argument in the host code because the host automatically figures that out for you. So yeah, that's the cool part. Questions? Any questions to that?
Where's the name Chlorine come from?
Chlorine because it comes from CL, but Clover was taken by some other project, so I decided to use Chlorine.
There's got to be more to it than that.
No, that's basically it. Any other questions?
The way it works,
I don't know. I mean, I'm open to any questions. What did I have for breakfast this morning? Yes.
What did you have for breakfast this morning?
I had an omelet. Cool. Well, Thanks to all the usual suspects, RCOS, Professor Goldschmidt, Professor Moretti, Sean Sullivan.